Part of the transition on this was trying to create 5,000 years of history with the lighting and the graphics, and then they did it with the wall treatment as well. So as we go through, what we'd like to do is start in the exhibit, try and get through the 9 different stone looks that are depicting the different time periods, and then we'll come out and talk about the title wall as well. Everything you see as the backdrop on the drywall, it's all armor coat, it's all decorative plaster. Henry, come here. Let me introduce you to Henry. Henry runs our field. He's our head artisan as well, and he was on this site. And I actually had him bring some tools. One thing about the product, guys, it's all hand troweled. There's no, so a lot of the techniques that we're using, were utilized, you know, it's old school techniques that we're doing here. Nothing modern really about it. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the stencil work. So we actually embed. So for us, this is a negative stencil. It's actually, we're double plastering everything. So we're do the first layer of plaster work as the backdrop. That dries, and then we set the actual stencil work, and then they'll come back in, plaster over top of it. As the material dries, the stencil will start to show, and then they dig the stencil out. So we're not carving in, we're digging out to create that illusion of it being carved. So batches matter with lime-based plaster, tinning it. We just work with the bases themselves. So all of our tinning is done here locally, but we have to tweak everything because from batch to batch, it'll take the tint differently. As we go through the museum, the stones are gonna get smaller. That's one of the concepts here, is that the building materials got smaller as time went through. This is a depiction, this is in Egypt. This is a different color change. We're still in the larger stone. This is our fresco wall and the Dead Sea Scroll as well. The fresco wall is kind of a nod to the Romans, and this is a duplication of going over top of a masonry wall with a lime-based plaster. So this archway, similar concept to the stencil. So the backdrop, all the white that you see, all the plaster work is done throughout the space, and then they come back and create the layover effect. But I think it does show the flexibility of the material to go from a polished plaster to a cave. Believe it or not, this is all decorative plaster as well. All the brick that you see is decorative plaster. Everything that you see in the orange has been plastered once. Then we come in, we use 136 rolls of this special tape that Henry has. All the vertical lines were dropped first with a laser. Then they come in, drop their horizontal lines, and then take every other piece out. So the title wall, everything that you see is armor coat. Everything is decorative plaster except the glass letters. This is the largest stencil job for armor coat in North America. This is both negative and positive stencil work. There's 26 layers of plaster on the wall. The stencil is completely buried. All the negative work is buried, and then we have to come in and do our positive work. All the letters that you see outside on top of the plaster, that's plaster as well. It's all positive stencil work. Now they're digging out the stencils. Instead of chiseling the map, they're digging the map out. Then they came in and added the glass and metal letters.
Welcome. So I think you can tell the project was kind of a large animal, big tiger by the tail. And the theater was kind of the jewel of the project, the centerpiece of it. This kind of nest we were building to then plant this 800-seat, tons of steel theater in the middle. One of the crucial parts that I'll highlight with Sunbelt, they were one of a small select team we brought together to execute the theater. So we had a survey company, a framing company, a drywall company, structural steel, a group that was basically here working very closely every single day. A building like that is a prototype of a prototype of a prototype. So it was a daily changing design and execution for all of the players. And Sunbelt was basically the folks that every single day, Daniel and his crew were here every single day keeping people productive. It was a very short timeline. The structural steel was in some cases curved, rolled sections, in some cases faceted, large wide flange sections. We needed to get from that structural shape to the smooth skin geometry you're seeing now, finished in architectural plaster. So we built up a layer of systems, started with light gauge curved CNC framing that came out. Sunbelt gave that trade access to that framing, which was a completely unique set of access requirements. Then the next layer was for the drywall crew. There's 3 layers of 5/8 drywall on the outside of this. And then the plaster crew came in behind the drywall crew. And again, each of those 3 groups had completely separate access requirements. So we had to have a flexible access system spread throughout this. And Daniel's group probably built and took down towers a dozen times within the space to allow different folks to get where they needed to be. The guys putting all this framing in, they needed to get up close and personal with the structural steel to put all the clips and brackets on. The plaster folks needed to be 2 feet away from the final layer of drywall. So a system had to be very flexible and productive. We couldn't shut this entire operation down for a week for the Sunbelt crew to come modify a bunch of things. They were doing it every day. There was no downtime. So we started working on all that framing down below. Simultaneously, we had to get this thing closed in. There was no glass, no skylight, anything installed here yet, and we were under the gun to get some finishes in. So we started working a separate crew up on top of here. This is all the same system from a framing standpoint, but a different finish. This is all EFIS up here. So Sunbelt provided swing stages at each side. So skylight guys could be working on one side, and glass and EFIS folks would be working on the other. This is all in addition to, they built an entire dance floor on the inside. There's literally miles of wiring on the inside. It's a state-of-the-art performing arts theater also. This shape is then concave inside, so it had some unique access requirements there.
We had to provide access to the ceiling for ductwork, all the acoustical panels, which you see there, and then also access to the side. So there was access decks pretty much everywhere except for where you stand. Most of the scaffold that we put it up, and then it's there, and then we take it down where the last one's out. So this was constantly evolving because of just trying to provide access at all times. Whether it's the shell you see here, and then also taking the scaffolding down without damaging anything. It was very, very, they were very careful with that, because if we were to damage anything, we're putting the scaffolding back up, and then we're risking damaging it more. So it was very tedious, we had to be very precise with our movements, especially now, because it looked like this when the scaffold came down.
He's glossing over that point quickly. Think about this. 19,000 pieces of scaffolding, 4 stories tall in an atrium, 6 inches away from the plaster. Finished plaster. So how many guys did you have in some cases in your chain? 10 guys? 12. Yeah, 12 people, starting at the top, handing these things down, tie off, safety equipment, everything, inches away from finished plaster. And I don't think I'm exaggerating. I don't think we hit the plaster one time that we had to fix.